Hello, today we are celebrating the achievements of our COVID Unsung Hero New Educator Award winner, Anna Young. Pictured here accepting her award from Princess Anne at the award ceremony at Windsor Castle in February 2022. Before we introduce Anna, I'm very pleased to welcome our interviewer today, Jenny Lewis from PA Consulting, who was one of our judges for the 2022 COVID Unsung Hero Awards. Jenny is the partner leading in health analytics at PA Consulting. Jenny is a health analytics professional with over 10 years experience working with health data in both academia and consulting. She works with healthcare organisations, helping to derive insight and drive improvement through understanding and exploiting data. Jenny, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and pleasure to be with you today. I'm very much looking forward to having a good chat with Anna. So Anna is currently the Senior Lecturer in Mechanical Engineering at the University of Bath. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of what she did for her award and what she does day to day, I just want to remind everybody of why we chose Anna as the winner of the New Educator Award. So I'm just going to read you out what we said on the day as a reminder. So Anna's commitment to her students, her faculty, her university and her local community was nothing short of heroic. She committed to supporting not only the students under her charge, but the colleagues around her in new and ingenious ways. It's a wonderful example of how one person can make a seismic difference to the world around them. So exciting times. Before we get into that, Anna, could you just tell us a little bit about your current role and what you do day to day?
Thanks. Yeah, well, as you said, I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Bath, and that job kind of is split about roughly three ways between teaching, research and admin. So I teach fluid mechanics to first-year undergraduates. That's stuff like how a wing works, and how to work out how much energy your wind turbine is going to generate. In my research, I also mainly look at fluid mechanics. So I study how to make aircraft engines more efficient, and how wings respond to turbulence, and also how to work out how to design turbines that generate power from the tide. And I'm really interested in renewables because I think they're very important for our future on the planet. And I think in the UK, we've got to make use of the huge resource we've got in our tides. So that's what I spend quite a lot of my time doing. And you asked what I do day to day. Well, one of the things I like about my job is that I don't really have a day to day. So last week I went to a networking event for women at all stages in their aerospace careers, and I took along some of our final year undergraduates. This week I'm testing a model tidal turbine in Rome. And next week I'll probably be thinking about my teaching for next semester and marking some reports that our final year students will have written about their projects. So yeah, there isn't really a day-to-day.
Really varied, yes. Yeah, no, it sounds fantastic. And we're all very jealous that you're talking to us from Rome today. Brilliant. Well, I'm keen to come back to a little bit about how you got into all of that. But before we do that, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work that you did, which led to you winning this award.
Yeah, it's quite hard, isn't it, to think back to March 2020.
Long time ago now.
Yeah, you kind of store it in a different part of your brain. But if we think back to how it felt at the beginning of the first lockdown, one of the really challenging things for us as a university was that our students were just scattered. They were all over the world. So I had a tutee, for example, who went back somewhere where the electricity was only on every other day. So accessing an online lecture is pretty difficult if you don't have power on Tuesdays. And as well as the students being scattered, we'd got staff who suddenly had to work out how to teach online. So in my department, we have over 1,000 undergraduates studying mechanical engineering, and we have about 70 staff teaching them. And so there was a huge range of what situations our students were in, and also what technical abilities our staff had. So one of the things that I did was help to kind of translate what we were getting from the central university into words my colleagues could understand, basically. So how do you work out what to send out in a pre-recorded lecture and what to cover in a Zoom call? How do you record a lecture in your spare bedroom when you're used to having an AV department to help you with that? How do you capture handwriting, which a lot of our lecturers do a lot of the time? And so getting all the hardware in place for that, making sure that we were kind of speaking what my colleagues would consider plain English, as opposed to kind of teaching jargon. That was quite the challenge. And then I guess the other side was the students. So as I've said, they were in a variety of situations. Some were on campus still, for various reasons. Some were at home. And it was quite hard to keep track of 1,000 undergraduates, even when they are all supposed to be in the same place. So when they're scattered, it's a bit of a disaster. And some of them, you know, it was a weird time, as we've already said, but some of them were getting on fine, you know, just kind of adapting, and some were really struggling. So spotting the students who were struggling, and then following them up was something that I put energy into. So we'd get a kind of spreadsheet from IT basically saying who hadn't logged on for a week or so. And then with a couple of others, I was making sure that we emailed those students just to see whether there was anything we could do to help them engage with their studies. So yeah, kind of lots of different staff, lots of different students, just trying to make sure that people didn't fall through the cracks, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, sounds really important. And I should imagine it's still making a big impact on those students today, having had the sort of care and attention you gave them in that period.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah. Some of them just really appreciated that I played Mario Kart music during the online lectures.
That's great. It's yeah. So it was all about making any way to keep ourselves keep spirits up in those months, as exactly. I remember. Exactly. And how has winning this award impacted you personally or professionally?
Yeah, I guess obviously it's given me quite a lot of visibility, both sort of internally and externally. But a lot of the kinds of things I was doing during the lockdown, they would probably come under the category of non-promotable tasks. So the things I was doing are really useful to the university. So it's really important that someone does them, but they're not really useful to my career, because the slightly weird thing about academia is what gets you recognition tends to be big achievements in research. And when you're hired as a lecturer, you're hired for your potential to do research that makes a big difference in the world. And so these things were taking time away from me writing papers and grant proposals. And to be honest, at the start of the pandemic, I didn't really feel like writing papers and grant proposals because they didn't feel very relevant to the sort of immediate crisis. But I think being able to add up all these things that didn't feel like very big things at the time, and say, okay, this is a coherent thing that I did that helped the department to adapt. I think it's been quite helpful for me. Yeah,
definitely. And you know, great, really great that you know you've managed to get some recognition for that through the work that WISE are doing. But we would hope that people listening to this will hear how important it is that people get recognition for the work that they do outside of their day jobs. Brilliant. Well, that all sounds absolutely fantastic. I think people would be really interested in hearing a little bit more about how you got into what you do, which sounds totally fascinating and certainly very much outside of anything I've ever come across. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what attracted you to this and how you got into the field you're in today.
Yeah, I mean, sort of by accident, like most people, when they look back, honestly. So when I was a small child, I was absolutely fascinated by cars. And then as a teenager, you know, you tell the careers advisor what you want to do. And I said I wanted to design cars. And she said, well, you should probably study mechanical engineering then. And that kind of fitted quite well academically because I enjoyed maths and physics. I liked the bits where you see how things work and solve problems. So engineering was quite a good fit. And my A-levels were maths, further maths, physics, and then on the end history, just for a bit of variety. And I did my undergraduate degree at Cambridge in engineering. But what happened at Cambridge was that I didn't get exposed to that much about cars during my undergraduate degree. what I found myself drawn towards was fluid mechanics and thermodynamics. So how to make a power station more efficient, how an aircraft engine works, that sort of stuff. And then I got my final year research project was aircraft engine compressors, working out how they go wrong. So I don't think I'd recommend that if you're scared of flying. It didn't help me for sure. Yeah, that final year project, I got on really well with my supervisor, and I really enjoyed kind of doing the experiments and finding out new things. He then offered me a PhD, basically doing the same thing for another 4 years. So working out some of the fine details of the flow between the blades that are rotating in the engine and the casing. So I studied thin air for 4 years. But what I found I enjoyed about that was kind of, like I said, putting pieces of information together into a story. And then after my PhD, I got a couple more research positions in Cambridge. And those positions, I carried on a bit with the aircraft engine stuff, but I had a bit of freedom to branch out into tidal power generation, which might sound like a little bit of a leap, but so an aircraft engine is a load of spinning aerofoils with flow going through it, and a tidal turbine is looks a bit like a wind turbine, but it's under the sea, and it's a load of spinning aerofoils with flow going through it. So in terms of the fluid mechanics, there's loads of crossover, and I've been able to use the kind of techniques I learned in aerospace in my renewables career. So yeah, that was another sort of 7 years in Cambridge, and then there's lots of upsides to an academic career, like hanging out in Rome for a week.
Absolutely, yeah.
But one of the downsides is that you're on fixed term contracts for quite a long time. So eventually I decided I wanted a permanent position, and I got a job as a lecturer at Bath. So I've been in Bath for about 3 years now, and I'm loving it. It's a really nice place to work. I do a little bit more teaching now than I used to do, but because I've found that what I enjoy is telling stories. I enjoy teaching because basically in teaching, you're telling stories to the students. So in research, the stories are new to everyone, including you. In teaching, the story's not new to you and it's not new to the world, but it's new to the students. And I enjoy helping them to kind of put those pieces together.
Which is interesting because it sounds like that's something you've discovered later on in your career as something that you're enjoying and taking on, in addition to all of the academic stuff that you've been doing over the past few years.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something that, reflecting on what part, when I enjoy my job most, it's when I'm telling stories.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. And if you were to take yourself back to your sort of teenage years, when you were first thinking about what career you'd go into and all that sort of stuff, have you got advice for your teenage self on the decisions that you made or how you made them?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything where I think, oh, I did that wrong, I really screwed that up and I shouldn't have gone in that direction. But I think so I think I'd just say just keep going. So keep doing what you enjoy, and perhaps I'd tell myself to back myself more, to work hard things out. Mm-hmm. So keep going, back yourself, do what you enjoy.
Brilliant. I totally agree with that. I've very much followed the things I've enjoyed in my career, and it's been really successful for me. But I mean, somewhat like you, I've ended up in a fairly technical career, technical industry, and certainly traditionally that's been fairly male dominated. I should imagine you actually probably have experienced that to a greater extent than I have, engineering being very significantly male focused. So I guess interested in the extent to which you have experienced that, and also how have you found the importance of female networks in your career progression?
Yeah, I think aerospace engineering is one of the most male dominated. It does depend a lot which bit of engineering you go into, even within mechanical engineering. Some bits of like bioengineering and medical engineering are very close to gender parity. Aero is more like 10%.
Yeah, I've got the same thing. So my background's more in data in a healthcare or biological sense, and there's definitely a stronger female presence, I think, in biosciences.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a cliche, isn't it, that you can't be what you can't see, but I think it's a cliche because it's true. So yeah, maybe having women sort of 1, 2, 3 steps further along the career ladder has been pretty helpful for me at various points. So if you look at somewhere like aerospace, where the number of women is so low, there are a few examples of some really successful women in aerospace, and obviously that's great, but it's pretty hard when you're an undergraduate to imagine yourself right at the top of the career ladder. So I think it's equally important that you see women at all stages in a career, so you can sort of plot your path. So I was at a networking event last week, and on my right was a lady who has just retired after a phenomenally successful career in aerospace, and on my left was a PhD student who I actually taught when she was a first-year undergraduate, and so I really enjoyed that kind of generational thing of people at different stages on the trajectory. Yeah, and I think also having women to bounce things off. So if someone, like, it quite often happens that someone says or does something and you basically want to decide whether to be offended by it or not. So just being able to say to someone else that, is this okay? Am I overreacting, or should I actually be really annoyed about this? Yeah, and I think just people who kind of understand, like, what's it like to be in an environment where you don't conform to the traditional stereotype. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, and how do you go about finding those people to be able to bounce off and have those slightly more diverse conversations?
I think you want to seek out somewhere where there are going to be people. So if you're thinking about where to work, like, don't think of those criteria as really sort of secondary. I don't think they are. So you don't have to be a trailblazer, or you could go and be a trailblazer after you've been somewhere where you're going to be sort of nurtured a bit more. Yeah, I think I've been fortunate at various points, but I think just it's not. You don't have to go into the most hostile environment you can find just to prove everyone wrong.
Yeah. And if you do end up in those situations, actively seeking out people to talk to is such an important thing, I think, just to feel like you've got some support coming from somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Keep
definitely.
in touch with people from previous jobs.
Yeah,
definitely.
really good advice. And finding a few mentors and people who are maybe outside of your current employer, who will give you the time and support around what your career, the way your career needs to go. Yeah. Do you think you've experienced stumbling blocks being a woman in your current field?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely have. For me, mostly kind of what would often be called microaggressions. So things that on their own seem pretty trivial, but they kind of add up over time. I sort of would liken it to cycling into a headwind. You can't really identify why it is that this feels difficult, but it is difficult. And if the headwind was taken away, you would have got much further. So quite often what happens to me at work now is I'll be in the room where all our post gets delivered, and someone will come in and assume that I'm an administrator and ask where their parcel is. And I've had people make comments, that you just wouldn't make to a man about my appearance or what I'm wearing. And I think also there's probably still quite a lot of assumptions about what women are kind of naturally interested in. And I think that's a real shame, because even if it was true, the range of skills and thinking styles that we need in STEM is just so much wider than people who want to sit in an office on their own and write computer code. I mean, if you want to sit in your office on your own and write computer code, there is a place for you in STEM, and that's brilliant. But we also need people who are not like that. And so I think these kind of stereotypes, both about what STEM is like and about what women are like, are totally unhelpful.
Yeah, and you winning this award and all the work that you've done towards it is such a brilliant example of bringing that breadth of skills to a highly technical area.
I think the other thing that I've realised is that men often don't realise these things unless women point them out. And that puts an unfortunate burden on women to spend energy on what is basically another non-promotable task. But it's hard. Like, so to take another example, at a lab where I previously worked, it was quite an oily, greasy kind of a lab, and so technicians and also the staff and students would get their hands dirty and need heavy duty soap, which is basically like soap with grit in, to get the grease off their hands. And there was only that soap in the men's toilets, but the men weren't going to know that, because fortunately the men don't go in the women's toilets. So actually, when I pointed it out, they were mortified and they put the soap in. But it's kind of like, you know, it's quite a small thing, but it sends quite a strong signal about who you're expecting to get their hands dirty. And so, yeah, they were rightly mortified, but they would never have known if a woman hadn't said, by the way, do you know we don't have proper soap in our toilets? So, yeah, I think men needs to be careful to listen and to put the effort in once they are made aware of issues, to avoid kind of having the women spend all their time doing that and not inventing things and writing papers, basically.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and so much of this is fixable if it's pointed out, and increasingly people are willing to fix it as well. I think if we can help them to see what's going on. Brilliant. Well, look, it's been totally brilliant to talk to you, Anna, and we could keep going forever. I just want to ask you one more question before we close, which is, do you have a message for young girls or women who are looking to pursue a career that is similar to yours within STEM?
Yeah, I think just the same advice that I would give to myself. So keep going, try things out and see whether you enjoy them. You may not necessarily enjoy the things you think you're going to enjoy. I genuinely thought I was going to be a car mechanic until I spent a week in an AA depot, and then I changed my mind about that. You may find that you love being a car mechanic, and that's the career for you. But whatever it is that you enjoy, there is a space in STEM. So you might like solving problems, you might like designing new things, you might like telling stories. Yeah, so just keep going.
Brilliant, wonderful advice, and I would love to hear all the stories of the people listening to this and what happens to them in their careers. Brilliant, thank you ever so much. It's been wonderful to talk to you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Anna, so much. That was a really, really inspiring, really interesting interview. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Anna.
Thanks, it's been great chatting to you, Jenny.
Thank you very much.